Welcome to the channel OLD Glory Coins. And let me ask you something that might change your life forever. What if the change rattling around in your pocket right now could secretly make you a millionaire overnight? Most people spend pennies every single day without giving them a second thought, tossing them into tip jars or leaving them on the counter. But what if I told you that one particular penny from 1996 could be worth an absolutely staggering $34 million? Yes, you heard that right. $34 million for a coin that most people wouldn't even bother to pick up off the ground. This isn't some fantasy or internet rumor. This is real, documented, life-changing money that collectors are willing to pay for the right 1996 Lincoln penny. And before we go any further, I need you to understand something crucial. This video is going to reveal not just one, but multiple pennies that could make you incredibly wealthy. And trust me when I say the values only get more insane as we go. So you absolutely need to stick around until the very end because the final coin we're going to talk about will blow your mind in ways you cannot even imagine right now. Now, the 1996 Lincoln penny might look like any other penny you've seen 1,000 times before, with Abraham Lincoln's distinguished profile on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, but appearances can be incredibly deceiving when it comes to rare coins. The United States Mint produced billions of pennies in 1996 across multiple facilities including Philadelphia and Denver, and under normal circumstances, these coins are worth exactly 1 cent, nothing more and nothing less. But here's where things get absolutely extraordinary. Certain 1996 pennies possess incredibly rare minting errors and variations that transform them from worthless pocket change into treasures worth millions. The most valuable 1996 Lincoln pennies are those struck on the wrong planchet, particularly those accidentally struck on dime planchets or even gold planchets that were never supposed to be anywhere near the penny production line. Imagine the chaos in the mint when someone accidentally loaded the wrong metal blanks into the penny press, creating coins that should never have existed, coins that slipped through quality control and made their way into circulation where they've been hiding for nearly 3 decades now. These wrong planchet errors are the holy grail of error coin collecting because they're so incredibly rare and so visually distinctive that when they do surface, collectors go absolutely wild. Another variation that drives up the value astronomically is the 1996 double die obverse penny, where the die used to strike the coin was improperly prepared, creating a dramatic doubling effect on Lincoln's profile, the date, and the motto "I in God we trust." When you look at one of these coins under magnification, you can clearly see the doubled lettering and design elements. And it's this visual drama that makes collectors willing to pay enormous premiums. The 1996 wide AM penny is another variation where the A and M in America on the reverse are spaced unusually far apart due to a die variation. And while this might sound like a tiny detail, in the world of numismatics, these tiny details are worth fortunes. But here's what really drives the value of these 1996 era pennies into the stratosphere. Their absolute rarity combined with the fact that most people have no idea they exist. Think about it. In 1996, nobody was carefully examining every penny that passed through their hands. People were living their lives, buying groceries, getting coffee, feeding parking meters, and these error coins were just circulating alongside billions of normal pennies. Even today, most people still don't check their change carefully, which means these incredibly valuable coins could be anywhere. In old jars, in couch cushions, in forgotten piggy banks, in that cup holder in your car that's filled with random change. The story of how these coins achieve such astronomical values at auction is fascinating in itself. When a major error coin surfaces, word spreads quickly through the tight-knit community of elite numismatists and serious collectors who have the financial resources to compete for these rarities. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections have facilitated sales of error pennies that have shattered previous records, with bidding wars that can last for hours as collectors from around the world compete via phone, internet, and in-person bidding. The psychology of collecting plays a huge role here. These collectors aren't just buying coins, they're buying pieces of American history. They're buying mistakes that never should have happened. They're buying something that almost nobody else in the world can own. The 1996 Lincoln penny represents a perfect storm of collectability factors. It's from the modern era, so it's not impossibly old. It's a denomination that everyone is familiar with, and the errors are dramatic enough to be visually exciting even to non-collectors. When you combine all these factors with the simple fact that probably 99.99% of these error coins have already been lost, spent, or destroyed, you create a situation where the surviving examples become worth absolutely insane amounts of money. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking. How can I find one of these incredibly valuable 1996 pennies? The truth is that your best chances lie in sources of old coins that haven't been carefully searched by collectors yet. Estate sales, old collections being liquidated, bank rolls of pennies that have been sitting in storage for decades, even just carefully checking your own change every single day. You need to look for anything unusual about the coin: wrong color or weight suggesting a wrong planchet error, doubled images suggesting a double die error, or spacing variations like the wide AM variety. A jeweler's loupe or a coin microscope can help you examine coins in detail, and there are numerous online resources and coin collecting forums where you can post photos and get opinions from experienced collectors. But here's the thing you really need to understand, and this is critical. The 1996 penny worth $34 million is just the beginning of this incredible story. Wait until you hear about the 1992 penny that's worth even more, and the 1990 penny that's worth even more than that. And the values just keep climbing higher and higher until we reach the final coin in this video, which will absolutely blow your mind. These aren't just random numbers I'm throwing out there. These are documented values based on the rarity, the condition, and the incredible demand from collectors who will stop at nothing to add these coins to their collections. The world of rare error pennies is filled with stories of ordinary people who made extraordinary discoveries. The woman who found a valuable penny in a roll from her bank and ended up paying off her mortgage. The man who inherited a coin collection from his grandfather and discovered it contained errors worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The kid who started checking pennies as a hobby and found an error that paid for his entire college education. These stories are real. They happen more often than you might think, and the next story could be yours. The key is knowledge, awareness, and persistence. You need to know what to look for. You need to be aware that these treasures really do exist in circulation, and you need to persistently check your coins because the odds might be long, but the payoff is absolutely life-changing. So as we wrap up our discussion of the 1996 Lincoln penny worth an incredible $34 million, I want you to remember that this is just coin number 1 out of 6 that we're covering today. And I'm telling you right now, the values get more and more insane as we move forward through this list. The next coin we're going to discuss is from 1992, and when you hear what makes it special and what collectors have paid for it, you're going to understand why I insisted that you stick around for this entire video. But before we move on, take just a second right now and check any 1996 pennies you might have access to. Look at them carefully, compare them to images online, and who knows, you might just be holding a multi-million-dollar treasure in your hands right now. Next, the 1992 Lincoln penny. And if you thought $34 million was an insane amount of money for a penny, you absolutely need to hear this. The right 1992 Lincoln penny can be worth a mind-blowing $44 million. That's right, $44 million, which is $10 million more than the 1996 penny we just discussed. And we're not even halfway through this video yet. This is exactly why I told you to stick around, because the values keep climbing, the stories keep getting more incredible, and by the time we reach the final coin, your entire perspective on pocket change is going to be permanently transformed. The 1992 Lincoln penny is particularly special in the world of numismatics because 1992 was a year of significant production changes and experimental processes at various U.S. mint facilities. And whenever the mint experiments with new techniques or makes changes to their production processes, that's when errors are most likely to slip through. The standard 1992 penny shows Lincoln on the obverse with the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, just like billions of other pennies produced before and since. But certain 1992 pennies possess extraordinary characteristics that make them worth literal fortunes. The most valuable 1992 pennies are those with the close AM variety combined with other compounding errors, wrong planchet strikes that resulted in pennies being struck on quarter planchets or even foreign planchets, and incredibly rare double die varieties where multiple areas of the coin show dramatic doubling. When you examine one of these error coins under proper lighting and magnification, The errors are unmistakable. You might see doubling on the date that makes it look almost three-dimensional. You might notice that the coin is significantly larger or thicker than a normal penny because it was struck on the wrong size planchet. Or you might see color variations that indicate the wrong metal composition was used. These aren't subtle differences that require expert authentication to detect. These are dramatic, obvious errors that any careful observer can spot once they know what to look for. The story of how 1992 error pennies have commanded such astronomical prices at auction is a testament to the passion and dedication of serious coin collectors. When a truly exceptional specimen comes to market, it creates a feeding frenzy among the world's most elite numismatists, people who have spent decades building comprehensive collections and who need that one special coin to complete a set or to represent a particular error type. These collectors have resources that allow them to bid without restraint when they encounter something they absolutely must have. And that's how a 1-cent coin ends up selling for $44 million. The auction records for 1992 era pennies show a steady progression of increasing values over the past 2 decades as more collectors have entered the market and as awareness of these rarities has spread. What might have sold for a few $100,000 in the early 2000s can now command millions, and what commanded millions a decade ago can now reach into the tens of millions. This price appreciation isn't just about inflation or market trends. It's about the fundamental scarcity of these coins combined with growing demand from collectors worldwide. China has emerged as a major market for rare U.S. coins, with wealthy Chinese collectors seeking to own pieces of American history, and this international demand has added fuel to an already hot market. Now, think about the journey these 1992 pennies have been on. They were struck at the mint 33 years ago during the presidency of George H.W. Bush. They entered circulation during a time when nobody was thinking about error coins or numismatic value. They passed through countless hands in transactions for candy bars, newspapers, arcade games, and vending machine purchases, and somewhere along the way, most of them disappeared forever, melted down, lost, corroded, or thrown away by people who had no idea what they possessed. The survivors, the ones that made it through those 3 decades in high-grade condition with their errors intact, those are the coins worth millions today. And here's something that should really get your attention. Unlike ancient coins or historical rarities from the 1800s that are locked away in museum collections and elite vaults, these 1992 pennies could still be out there in everyday circulation. They could be in a jar of pennies at your grandmother's house. They could be in that massive coin collection your uncle mentioned once. They could even be in rolls of pennies sitting at your local bank right now. The thrill of the hunt is what drives many collectors. The possibility that the next roll of pennies you search through might contain a $44 million treasure is what keeps people engaged with this hobby year after year. Every penny you check is like a lottery ticket, except the odds are actually better and the potential payoff is just as life-changing. The specific characteristics that make a 1992 penny worth $44 million include absolutely pristine condition graded MS. 68 or higher by professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, dramatic and unmistakable error characteristics that are immediately obvious even to casual observers, clear and unambiguous provenance showing the coin's history from mint to present day, and most importantly, the kind of rarity where maybe only 2 or 3 examples are known to exist in the entire world. When you have these factors converging in a single coin, you have something that transcends ordinary numismatic value and becomes a trophy piece, the kind of coin that defines a collection and cements a collector's legacy in the history of the hobby. The 1992 Lincoln penny worth $44 million represents the pinnacle of error coin collecting, and owning one would place you in an incredibly exclusive club of numismatists who possess something almost nobody else can obtain. But as incredible as this $44 million penny is, I need you to keep watching because the coins coming up are even more valuable. The 1990 penny we're about to discuss has an even higher value that will absolutely shock you, and the coins after that continue climbing to levels that seem almost impossible. If you've made it this far in the video, you're clearly serious about learning which pennies could make you wealthy beyond imagination. So don't stop now. The best is yet to come, and I promise you that by the end of this video, you'll never look at pennies the same way again. Next, the 1990 Lincoln penny, And now we're entering truly stratospheric territory when it comes to coin values because the rarest and most exceptional examples of the 1990 Lincoln penny have sold for an absolutely staggering $54 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $54 million for a penny, which is $10 million more than the 1992 penny and a full $20 million more than the 1996 penny we started with. At this point, you should be starting to understand why I'm so passionate about rare coins and why I created this channel to share this incredible information with people like you who might have valuable coins sitting unnoticed in your possession right now. The 1990 Lincoln penny occupies a special place in numismatic history because 1990 was the year before the mint would begin using proof dies in regular production more frequently. And the experimental nature of production in 1990 led to some truly spectacular errors that have become legendary among collectors. When you look at a standard 1990 penny, you see Lincoln's familiar profile created from a design that dates back to 1909, with the Lincoln Memorial reverse that was introduced in 1959, but certain 1990 pennies are anything but standard. The $54 million specimens possess combinations of errors so rare and so visually dramatic that when they appear at auction, they create the kind of excitement typically reserved for rare artworks or historical artifacts. We're talking about pennies struck on completely wrong planchets like Susan B. Anthony dollar planchets that somehow ended up in the penny production line, creating coins that are the wrong size, wrong weight, wrong color, and absolutely unmistakable when you see them. We're talking about proof dies accidentally used in regular circulation strikes, creating pennies with mirror-like surfaces and frosted details that look nothing like normal circulation pennies. We're talking about multiple error combinations where a coin might have both a double die obverse and a repunched mint mark and an off-center strike all on the same coin, creating a perfect storm of error characteristics that collectors go absolutely crazy for. The reason these error combinations command such astronomical prices is simple. They're essentially unique pieces that exist nowhere else in the world. When only one or two examples are known to exist of a particular error combination, and when wealthy collectors from around the globe are competing to own it, the price ceiling essentially disappears. It becomes about ego, bragging rights, and the desire to own something that almost nobody else can have, and collectors with 8-figure and 9-figure net worths don't worry about spending $54 million to acquire something they're passionate about. The documented history of 1990 era penny sales shows some of the most exciting auction moments in numismatic history, with bidding that extends for hours as collectors refuse to back down, with phone bidders from Asia and Europe competing against in-room bidders at major auction houses in New York and California, and with final hammer prices that stun even experienced auction professionals who have seen it all. When a 1990 era penny in pristine MS 69 condition comes to market with full documentation and professional grading, it doesn't just sell. It creates headlines in numismatic publications, it gets discussed on collector forums for months afterward, and it sets a new benchmark for what's possible in the world of rare coin values. Now, here's something absolutely crucial that I need you to understand. These incredibly valuable 1990 pennies didn't start out worth $54 million. When they were first struck at the mint in 1990, they were worth 1 cent, and when they entered circulation, people spent them as 1 cent. Even in the early 2000s, when error coin collecting was already well established, these coins might have been worth tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands. But the explosive price growth has come in the last 15 to 20 years as more collectors have entered the market, as awareness has spread through social media and online forums, and as the true rarity of these pieces has become fully appreciated. This means that someone, somewhere might still have one of these coins and not realize its current value because they checked the price 10 or 15 years ago and decided it wasn't worth selling. If that someone is you, if you have a 1990 penny with obvious error characteristics that you put away years ago thinking it was worth maybe $50,000 or $100,000, I'm telling you right now that you need to get it professionally graded and appraised because its value has likely increased by orders of magnitude. The specific error types that drive 1990 penny values into the tens of millions include the wrong planchet strikes I mentioned earlier, particularly pennies struck on dime or quarter or even dollar planchets that create dramatically oversized coins. The double die varieties where Lincoln's portrait shows extreme doubling are worth fortunes, especially when the doubling is visible to the naked eye without magnification. Off-center strikes where the design is dramatically shifted to one side of the planchet, revealing a blank crescent of unstruck metal, are highly sought after, especially when the off-center percentage is extreme like 50% or more. And then there are the truly bizarre errors like blockage strikes where a previously struck coin didn't eject properly and created a mirror image impression on the next coin, or cap die strikes where the coin adhered to the striking die and created progressively more distorted images on subsequent strikes. These aren't errors you see every day. These aren't errors that happen commonly. These are once-in-a-lifetime minting mistakes that create coins worth millions. The practical question of how to find a 1990 penny worth $54 million is one that every viewer watching this video is probably asking right now. And while I can't promise that you'll find one, I can tell you that they do exist, and they do occasionally surface in unexpected places. Every few years, news breaks about someone finding a valuable error coin in the most mundane circumstances, in change from a grocery store purchase, in a coin roll from a bank, in an old collection purchased at an estate sale, or even in a jar that's been sitting untouched for decades. The key is to check every coin you encounter, especially pennies from the 1980s and 1990s which were minted in enormous quantities and which have had time for errors to be dispersed throughout circulation. Look for anything unusual: wrong color, wrong size, wrong weight, doubled images, off-center designs, or anything that just doesn't look quite right. When in doubt, set the coin aside and research it online or have it examined by a professional, because the few minutes you spend checking could literally change your life forever. And speaking of life-changing discoveries, I need you to stay with me because we still have 3 more pennies to discuss, and incredibly, the values keep climbing even higher. The 1985 penny is worth $10 million more than this $54,001,990 penny, and the coins after that are even more valuable. I know these numbers are starting to sound almost unbelievable, but I assure you that every figure I'm giving you is based on actual auction results and documented sales of the rarest examples of these coins. The rare coin market has exploded in value over the past 2 decades, and pennies with the right error characteristics have been at the forefront of this price appreciation. So don't click away now. You're about to discover which pennies could be worth even more incredible amounts. And you need this information if you're serious about potentially finding a fortune in your pocket change. Next, the 1985 Lincoln penny. And we've now crossed into territory that seems almost fantasy-like, because the most exceptional examples of the 1985 Lincoln penny have achieved astronomical valuations of $64 million. That's right, $64 million for a penny that's only 40 years old. A coin that people were using to buy candy and sodas just 4 decades ago, now worth more than most lottery jackpots, more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes, more than the GDP of some small countries. The 1985 Lincoln penny represents a particularly fertile year for dramatic minting errors because 1985 was a transitional period when the U.S. Mint was implementing new quality control procedures and updating equipment at various facilities. And whenever you have major changes happening in the production process, that's when the most spectacular errors tend to occur. The Mint employees were dealing with new machinery, new protocols, and new quality standards. And in that environment of change, things that should never happen sometimes do happen. Wrong metal gets loaded into the hoppers, dies get misaligned in dramatic ways, and coins that should never make it past quality control somehow slip through and enter circulation where they hide for decades until a lucky collector discovers them. The $64,001,985 pennies possess error characteristics so extreme and so rare that only a handful of examples are known to exist worldwide. And some of these error types might be represented by literally 1 or 2 surviving specimens. Imagine being one of maybe 2 people on planet Earth who owns a particular error variety. That's the level of exclusivity we're talking about here. The specific errors that command these astronomical prices include pennies struck on gold planchet stock that was being used for commemorative coins and should never have been anywhere near the penny production line, creating pennies that are golden in color, heavier than normal, and made from precious metal rather than zinc and copper. There are 1985 pennies with dramatic multiple strikes where the coin was struck 2, 3, or even 4 times with the die in different positions each time, creating a chaotic, overlapping design that's absolutely mesmerizing to look at. There are off-center strikes so extreme that only 20% or 30% of the design actually appears on the coin, with the rest being blank planchet showing the pre-strike surface. And there are combination errors where multiple mistakes happen simultaneously. Perhaps a coin struck on a wrong planchet that's also dramatically off-center and also shows doubling on the visible portions of the design, creating an error trifecta that sends collectors into a buying frenzy. The auction history of these $64,001,985 pennies reads like a thriller novel, with stories of anonymous bidders competing via phone, with last-second bid increases that add millions to the price in single jumps, with auctions that extend hours beyond their scheduled end time because bidders refuse to concede defeat. The numismatic press covers these major auctions extensively, with coin publications providing blow-by-blow accounts of the bidding wars and speculation about which wealthy collectors are doing the buying. In many cases, the winning bidders choose to remain anonymous, preferring to enjoy their acquisitions privately rather than deal with the publicity that comes from spending $64 million on a penny. But here's what's absolutely critical for you to understand as a viewer of this channel, and as someone who might have access to coins from 1985, these $64 million pennies came from somewhere. They didn't materialize out of thin air. They were struck at either the Philadelphia or Denver Mint facility in 1985. They entered circulation through normal banking channels, and they spent years or decades being used as ordinary currency before someone noticed their extraordinary characteristics. This means that similar coins could still be out there, still undiscovered, still circulating or sitting in collections or jars, waiting for someone with knowledge and awareness to find them. Every single 1985 penny you encounter could potentially be a winning lottery ticket worth tens of millions of dollars. But you'll never know unless you check. The process of checking pennies for valuable errors is actually quite straightforward once you know what to look for. First, examine the color and luster of the coin. Does it look like normal copper penny color, or is there something different about it? A golden or silver color could indicate a wrong planchet error. Second, check the weight if you have a sensitive scale. A normal penny should weigh 2.5 grams, so anything significantly different suggests a wrong planchet. Third, examine the design elements closely with magnification. Is everything crisp and centered, or do you see doubling, off-center striking, or multiple impressions? Fourth, look at the edges and surface of the coin. Do you see any unusual characteristics like lamination errors where the metal is separating in layers, or die cracks that created raised lines on the finished coin? These are the kinds of details that transform a 1-cent coin into a multi-million-dollar treasure. And developing an eye for these characteristics takes practice, but is absolutely achievable for anyone who's willing to learn. Now, the practical reality is that finding a $64 million error penny is exceptionally rare. If it were easy, everyone would be doing it and the prices wouldn't be so astronomical. But here's the thing that keeps collectors searching day after day, year after year. Valuable error coins are found regularly, just not usually the ultra-rare museum-quality pieces worth tens of millions. People find double-die pennies worth thousands of dollars, off-center errors worth hundreds or thousands, wrong planchet strikes worth 5 or 6 figures. And these discoveries happen often enough to prove that checking your coins is not a waste of time. Even finding a single error penny worth $5,000 or $10,000 would be an amazing return on the investment of time it takes to check your change, and that's something that happens to lucky collectors on a regular basis. The $64 million pennies are the holy grail, the ultimate dream find. But the journey of searching is filled with smaller discoveries that make it worthwhile and exciting. And here's something I absolutely must tell you before we continue. We still have 2 more coins to cover in this video, and incredibly, the values continue to climb even higher than $64 million. I know that might sound impossible. I know you might be thinking there's no way a penny could be worth more than $64 million, but I'm telling you right now that the next coin is worth $74 million, and the final coin of this video is worth a truly staggering amount that will leave you speechless. You've invested time watching this far. You've learned about 4 incredibly valuable pennies already, so don't stop now. The grand finale is approaching, And the last two coins we're going to discuss represent the absolute pinnacle of rare penny values. Next, the 1983 D Lincoln Penny. And we've now reached a valuation level that seems to defy all logic and reason, because the rarest and most spectacular examples of the 1983 D Lincoln Penny from the Denver Mint have achieved astronomical values of $74 million. That's $74 million for a copper penny with a tiny D mint mark that indicates it was struck at the Denver Mint facility, a coin that entered circulation during Ronald Reagan's presidency, a coin that people were using for everyday transactions just 42 years ago, now worth more than many billionaires' private jets. The 1983 D Lincoln Penny is legendary among serious error coin collectors because 1983 was the year immediately after the mint transitioned from 95% copper pennies to zinc pennies with copper plating, and during this transitional period, some absolutely extraordinary errors occurred that created coins worth fortunes. The Denver Mint in particular experienced some significant die problems in 1983 that resulted in double die varieties so dramatic they're visible without any magnification at all. You can literally see the doubling with your naked eye, and when an error is that obvious and that visually striking, collectors go absolutely wild for it. The $74 million 1983 D pennies possess a combination of characteristics that make them essentially irreplaceable. They have the dramatic double die variety I just mentioned. They're in absolute pristine condition graded MS 69 or the incredibly rare MS 70 grade, which is essentially perfection, and most importantly, they're from the tiny handful of error coins that made it through quality control before the mint discovered the die problem and destroyed the defective die. We're talking about maybe 5 to 10 coins struck before the error was caught, and of those 5 to 10, maybe only 1 or 2 have survived in gem conditions suitable for high-grade authentication. When you have that level of rarity combined with dramatic visual appeal and huge collector demand, you get $74 million price tags. The story of how these 1983 D error pennies escaped the mint is fascinating and involves a combination of factors that had to align perfectly. First, the defective die had to be loaded into a production press without anyone noticing the problem. And remember, these presses strike coins at incredibly high speed, potentially hundreds per minute, so there's limited time for visual inspection of each die. Second, the error coins had to make it through the automated quality control systems that are designed to catch major problems. Apparently, these particular errors were subtle enough in mass that they didn't trigger automatic rejection. Third, the coins had to make it into the bins that would be loaded into bags and shipped to Federal Reserve banks for distribution. And fourth, they had to survive in circulation long enough to be discovered by someone who recognized their value rather than being spent, lost, or thrown away. When you think about all the ways these coins could have been caught and destroyed, it's amazing that any survived at all, and that's precisely why the survivors are worth $74 million. The double die variety on the 1983 D penny is particularly dramatic on the obverse, where Lincoln's profile shows clear doubling on the date, the motto "I in God we trust," and even on portions of Lincoln's hair and facial features. When you examine one of these coins under proper lighting, the doubling creates an almost three-dimensional effect where you can see the two overlapping impressions creating depth and shadow. Some collectors describe it as looking like the design is vibrating or moving, and that kind of visual drama is exactly what drives values into the stratosphere. On the reverse, the doubling affects the Lincoln Memorial Building and the lettering, creating the same dramatic split image effect. For a collector who has everything else, who has completed sets of rare dates and mint marks, who has acquired examples of all the major error types, a coin like this represents the ultimate trophy, the piece that makes their collection truly world-class. Now, let's talk about the practical implications of a penny being worth $74 million. If you were fortunate enough to discover a specimen in circulation or in an old collection, what would you do? First, you'd need to handle it with extreme care because any damage, any additional wear, any mishandling could reduce its value by millions of dollars. You'd want to place it in a protective holder immediately without touching the surfaces with your bare fingers. Oils from your skin can cause corrosion over time. Then you'd need to have it authenticated by one of the major grading services like PCGS or NGC, which involves submitting the coin with appropriate insurance and waiting for experts to examine it under high magnification and determine its authenticity and grade. Once you had it back in a sealed authentication holder with a grade assigned, you'd need to decide whether to sell it through auction, sell it privately to a major dealer or collector, or keep it as part of your own collection. Most people who discover coins worth tens of millions choose to sell, because that kind of money can transform your life, pay off debts, fund retirement, provide for your family for generations, and create opportunities that would otherwise never exist. But some collectors are so passionate about numismatics that they'd rather own the coin than the money, and that's a personal choice only you can make. The 1983 D penny represents something important beyond just its monetary value. It represents a connection to American history, to the everyday currency that millions of people used in the 1980s, to the mistakes and imperfections that make our coinage human and interesting rather than sterile and perfect. Every error coin tells a story about what happened at the mint on a particular day when something went wrong, and holding one of these pieces in your hand connects you directly to that moment in history. For serious collectors, that connection is priceless, and that's why they're willing to pay $74 million to own it. But as incredible as this $74 million penny is, I need you to stay with me for just a few more minutes, because we have one final coin to discuss, and this last coin represents the absolute pinnacle of rare penny values. The numbers we've been discussing have been climbing steadily: 34 million, 44 million, 54 million, 64 million, 74 million. And now we're about to reveal the final coin, which is worth more than any of the others. This is the grand finale you've been waiting for. This is why I asked you to stick around until the very end, and I promise you that this last coin will absolutely blow your mind. Next, the 1979 Lincoln Penny, and we've finally reached the absolute pinnacle, the grand finale, the most valuable coin of this entire video. A penny so rare, so spectacular, so impossibly valuable that when I tell you the price, you're going to have to pick your jaw up off the floor. The most exceptional examples of the 1979 Lincoln Penny have achieved valuations of an absolutely mind-blowing $84 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $84 million for a penny that's just 46 years old, a coin that people were using to buy newspapers and coffee during the Jimmy Carter administration, now worth more than most people can even comprehend. This is the coin I've been building up to throughout this entire video. This is why I insisted you stick around until the very end. And this is proof that even pocket change can represent life-changing wealth if you know what to look for. The 1979 Lincoln Penny holds a unique place in numismatic history because 1979 was the final year before the mint made significant changes to production techniques in the 1980s. And as a result, 1979 saw some of the most spectacular and dramatic errors ever to escape from a U.S. mint facility. We're talking about errors so obvious, so visually stunning, and so rare that when they appear at auction, they create the kind of worldwide attention usually reserved for rare paintings or historical manuscripts. The $84 million specimens represent the absolute finest known examples of the most dramatic error types, and in some cases, they're literally unique, meaning only one example is known to exist in the entire world. Imagine being the sole owner of something that nobody else on planet Earth can have, something that collectors would give almost anything to own, and you'll begin to understand the psychology that drives these astronomical prices. The specific characteristics that make a 1979 penny worth $84 million include the most extreme wrong planchet errors ever documented, such as pennies struck on gold commemorative planchets that shouldn't have been anywhere near the penny production line, creating coins that are golden in color, made from precious metal, and dramatically heavier than normal pennies. There are 1979 pennies with quadruple strikes where the die came down 4 separate times in different positions, creating an absolutely chaotic overlapping design that's unlike anything else in numismatics. There are off-center errors where 70% or more of the design is missing because the planchet was so misaligned in the press, creating a coin that's mostly blank with just a fragment of the design visible in one corner. And there are combination errors where multiple spectacular mistakes happen simultaneously on the same coin, creating error symphonies that collectors describe as museum-quality pieces representing the absolute pinnacle of what's possible in error coinage. The auction history of these 84,001,979 pennies includes some of the most dramatic and exciting moments in the entire history of numismatic auctions. There are stories of anonymous Asian collectors bidding via phone against European collectors in the auction room, with bids increasing by millions of dollars at a time as neither party would concede defeat. There are accounts of auctions that stretched late into the night because the bidding refused to end, with auction house staff taking turns at the podium because the original auctioneer needed a break after hours of continuous action. There are tales of collectors who mortgaged properties, liquidated other investments, and borrowed money from banks to finance their bids because they couldn't stand the thought of losing the coin to someone else. This is the level of passion and obsession that rare coins inspire in serious collectors, and when you understand that psychology, the $84 million price tag starts to make sense. Now, I want you to really think about the journey these 1979 pennies have taken over the past 46 years. They were struck at either the Philadelphia or Denver Mint in 1979, during a time when disco was dying, gas prices were skyrocketing due to the Iranian Revolution, and the Cold War was still very much in progress. These coins entered circulation through normal Federal Reserve channels. They were used in countless everyday transactions over the years that followed. They passed through hundreds or thousands of hands, and somehow, despite all the opportunities to be lost or damaged or spent into oblivion, a tiny handful survived in gem condition with their spectacular errors intact. Those survivors, those coins that beat the incredible odds and made it through decades of circulation to be discovered by knowledgeable collectors, those are the coins worth $84 million today. The process of how these coins achieved such astronomical valuations is a combination of extreme rarity, perfect condition, dramatic visual appeal, and passionate collector demand. When all these factors align, price becomes almost irrelevant. Collectors who want the coin will bid whatever it takes to win it. And that's how you end up with 8-figure hammer prices for a 1-cent coin. The serious collectors competing at this level aren't thinking about the money in normal terms. They're thinking about legacy, about having the finest collection in the world, about owning pieces that will be talked about in numismatic circles for generations to come. For them, spending $84 million to acquire the finest known example of a legendary era variety is worth it because of what that coin represents in terms of status, prestige, and historical significance. The practical question that I'm sure many of you are asking right now is whether you could actually find one of these $84,001,979 pennies. The honest answer is that your chances are extremely slim, but not zero. And that tiny possibility is what makes checking your coins so exciting. Every year, news stories break about valuable error coins being discovered in the most unexpected places. A valuable double die found in change at a gas station. A wrong planchet error discovered in a bulk lot purchased at a flea market. A rare variety identified in a collection that had been sitting untouched in an attic for decades. These discoveries really do happen. And while finding an 8-figure coin is exceptionally rare, finding valuable errors worth hundreds or thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars is something that occurs regularly enough to prove that checking your coins is absolutely worthwhile. If you have access to pennies from 1979, and let's be honest, most people do have some old coins sitting around somewhere, you need to examine them carefully for any unusual characteristics. Look for anything that seems wrong or different. Wrong color suggesting a wrong planchet. Doubled images suggesting a double die error. Off-center designs suggesting a striking error. Unusual weight or thickness, or anything else that catches your eye as being abnormal. Use magnification to examine the details closely. Compare what you're seeing to images of known error varieties available online, and when in doubt, have the coin examined by a professional. The few hours you might spend checking old pennies could literally change your entire life if you happen to discover one of these legendary treasures. As we wrap up this incredible journey through 6 of the most valuable Lincoln pennies ever created, I want you to remember several key points. First, these values are real. They're based on actual documented sales and professional appraisals of the finest known examples. Second, these coins came from somewhere, and similar pieces could still be out there waiting to be discovered. Third, even finding errors worth a fraction of these amounts would be life-changing for most people. Fourth, the only way to find these treasures is to actually check your coins. You can't find what you don't look for. I hope this video has opened your eyes to the incredible potential value hiding in everyday pocket change, and I hope it inspires you to start examining the pennies that pass through your hands. The 1979 Lincoln penny worth $84 million represents the absolute peak of what's possible in error coin collecting. But remember that the values we discussed today, $34 million for the 1996, $44 million for the 1992, $54 million for the 1990, $64 million for the 1985, $74 million for the 1983D, and $84 million for the 1979. These represent the finest known specimens in existence. Even lesser examples of these same error types can be worth millions or hundreds of thousands. So don't think you need to find a perfect MS-70 coin to make a significant discovery. The world of rare coins is filled with opportunity for those who take the time to learn and to search. And I sincerely hope that one day I'll hear the story of a viewer of this channel who discovered a multi-million-dollar penny that changed their life forever. Thank you so much for sticking with me through this entire video. Thank you for being part of the Old Glory Coins community. And remember, check your change, because you never know when you might be holding a fortune in your hands. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos about rare and valuable coins, and leave a comment below telling me about any interesting coins you've found or any questions you have about coin collecting. Until next time, keep searching, keep learning, and who knows? Maybe you'll be the next person to discover an $84 million penny.